Hi, I'm Annabelle. I've been part of G2 and living in York for about 9 years now, so I came as a student and I'm talking to you today about money management because once I graduated, despite doing a degree in law, I went to work for Christians Against Poverty. So Christians Against Poverty are a predominantly debt management charity, and I worked for a bit as a debt advisor, and now I manage a group of debt advisors. I'm by no means an expert on all things money, but I'm probably a bit more comfortable talking about it than some others might be, and I've learned a few tips and different things along the way as I've done that. So what I wanted to start today by looking at was just a bit of a focus on what the Bible says about money. The Bible has a lot to say about money that we won't be able to go through all in this session today, but I'd love it if this kind of sparks a bit of curiosity, something that you might go away and find out a bit more of, do a bit of a reading around, or maybe when you have a bit of a chat, you'll learn some different things from one another about what the Bible says. Did you know that 16 out of the 38 parables that Jesus told talk about money or possessions? Or that there are over 200 verses directly about money and over 2,000 that look at money and materialism. So there's quite a lot in there. And as I said, we won't look at them all now, but we can pull out some themes just to help us start off. So I'm going to rattle through a few different Bible verses in this bit and read them out to you. But point one is that money, as with everything else, is ultimately God's. So in Genesis 1, God creates the world and everything in it. That includes us, and we've gone on to kind of create a system of money. And that means that, as with everything else, it all belongs to Him ultimately. I think Deuteronomy 8 sums this up well, where it says, "You may say to yourself, my power and strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember, the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant, which He swore to your ancestors as it is today." It all comes from Him. Point two is that our biggest role as humans is to steward God's creation, and money plays a part in that. So again in Genesis, God tells Adam and Eve to steward the earth, to look after it, to be fruitful, to make use of it and to guard it. And money plays a role in how we do that as humans. How we use our money, how we use our resources, plays out in how we look after the world that God has asked us to look after. In Matthew 25, one of the parables that Jesus shares is about money and possessions and how different servants are given different things to look after. And he congratulates one of them on being a good steward and on using it well. And he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much." So everything, including money, is God's. We're meant to steward it and look after it well. Number three is that a wrong attitude to money can have an impact on your relationship with God. Money itself is, just like everything else, part of our world, but there are things about money and how we use it that can pull us away from God if we're setting that as our main goal. And that's definitely something, I think I thought was quite simple when I was growing up. And then as I've had, more money and more opportunities to make decisions for myself, you realise, that is a real thing to be aware of. And there's a couple of parts in the Bible that say that better than I could. So in 1 Timothy 6, it says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmless desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." And I think that's just that warning, isn't it? That it's not about having money, but it's about that being a bigger goal for us than following God and doing what He's leading us into. That can mean that we end up on a path that's leading us away from Him rather than to Him. And in Matthew 6, Jesus says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So it's quite direct, but I think that's because it is one of those things we do have to kind of be aware of and wrestle with a bit. And the point number 4 is that money should be used fairly, wisely, and to look after those in need. I've got a quote from somewhere that I can't remember where I found it, but it's a good one, so I'll use it anyway. Pretend it's me. Our goal is not to be debt-free or to be wealthy. Our goal is to glorify God in all things, including our finances. So it's not about how much we have or how little we have, but it's about honouring God with them. And there's so many points in the Bible where it talks about how we use our money, how we use our resources, how we use our whole lives, essentially to, be wise, to look after those who need it, to share with others. In Leviticus, it talks about the year of Jubilee, where every 50 years there's a financial resource reset, where anyone who is in debt, anyone who's enslaved because of debt, all of that is to be written off. They also kind of reset to if you owned a piece of land at that point, then 50 years ago, it just becomes yours again, no matter what. It's quite a radical way of living. In Leviticus 19, it talks about using your resources and your fields as they had at the time in the farming community to make sure there's something there for the people who don't have the resources themselves. So it says, when you reap the harvest of your land, don't reap to the edges of your field, don't gather everything you possibly could in. Don't go over your vineyard a second time, but leave some things for the poor and for the foreigner, for the people who in their society didn't have a field of their own, didn't have a way of gathering and growing food for themselves, but that you should leave something left so that you've got enough for yourself, they can come and take for themselves as well. And then Deuteronomy 15, it says, "If among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother." And I think it's quite interesting just to see that this is a theme kind of really early on when God's talking to people about how they set up their society, when he's talking to the people of Israel about how they should live their lives. That I think sometimes we can think these themes kind of come only when Jesus comes, or only in the early church, where we do see them selling all of their possessions and giving it into the church. And we see some quite radical stuff, but actually it's there the whole way through. And I think it's in that thing of money being used fairly and wisely where we think about who do we give it away to, where we give it in terms of church, where we give it in terms of those who are in need as well. So at this point, I think it would be good to pause and just have a think around how you see money in the Bible, how you think about how God views money. Is it something you thought about a lot? Is it something you've not really thought about before? Is there anything in there that kind of surprised you or made you think differently? Brilliant. Hopefully you had some helpful discussions around what the Bible says about money. Now we're going to run through quick 5 tips around how we use our money, how we think about them. 3 of them are really practical and 2 are a little bit more about how you make decisions around how you use your money. So tip number 1, starting at the basics that will really help us out, is have a budget, build a budget. Go through what your finances are and work out how much do you need to pay, how much money have you got coming in at all the different points in the month, and then how much do you need to pay for your rent, for your mortgage, for your bills, for all the different things, and kind of have something that you can refer back to and stick to. And it might be helpful to kind of do one as a starting point and then keep coming back to it and seeing, was it realistic? I think we probably have a tendency to think we spend slightly less on eating out or takeaways or clothes than we might actually in reality. And so it's good to kind of set what you think and then revisit that and see, is that true, and keep it updated. Number 2 is think about your bank accounts and how you use them. There's so many different ways of doing this. You might just have one at the moment, which is a good starting point, but it can be really helpful to kind of have one where your money comes into, maybe have another account where you do your kind of day-to-day spending off of, that's got that number that you're planning to spend on your budget, so you know, you can kind of see visibly, oh, this is coming down and I'm halfway through the month, but I'm more than halfway through the money, so maybe I need to think. And definitely have some like savings accounts. You can get all sorts, so I'm definitely not the person to advise you on that, but having a think about where's the best, if you are saving some money, where's the best place to put that. So I have an account that my income comes into and my bills are paid out of, and then I have another account where I put on a certain amount of money I'm planning to spend that month for things like food shopping, petrol, coffees, that sort of thing, and then I can see through the month those things where I'm maybe, you know, spending too much time in a coffee shop, and it doesn't mean that you can't do that. You can make a choice to keep doing that, but at least you know the decision you're making, which is essentially point 3 of track what you're spending in some way. Some people like to do this by using cash. That's a little bit hard today, I think. Some people just note everything down. The easiest way I've found is having a bank card where it tracks it for you and you can see what you're spending in different categories. And there are a few banks that do that for you. And as I said, it doesn't mean that you're like, oh my goodness, I've, you know, already been out for dinner, I can't possibly go out again. But you just know that you're spending a bit more than you planned to, and you can put a bit more on if you need. And then the last, so that's the first 3, build a budget, think about your bank accounts, track your spending. And then points 4 and 5 are a little bit more theory, like how do you make, if you're going to do those things, how are you making the decision? How would you decide what to budget? What should you be putting where? So number 4 is think about your values and your goals. When you're building your budget, you need to know what's most important to you, what you value, and put the money there. So you might be needing to save for a goal. You might have something coming up that's really important to you. And so you might be spending less in your day-to-day because it's really important to you to save for that goal. Conversely, you might actually be really focused at the moment on enjoying where you are and what you're doing, and not have a particular goal you want to save for, and then be able to spend a bit more in your day-to-day. But I think this also comes into sort of your values. Do you value generosity? Do you want to put some money aside so that you can be giving to your church, so that you can be giving to different charities? Who is it that you're wanting to give to and help? Who is it that you think God's calling you to serve and to be a part of, and where are you leaving money to give to that? I also know I've had some friends who would keep a bit of money aside each month that was for kind of random giving. So they had their giving set up, but then they'd also keep something aside for that time where, you know, where your friend's doing a fundraiser for something, or you just see something and there's a need and you want to give to it. And they found that helpful for kind of keeping that in their mind as well as like an automatic thing that happened. Then number 5 is just understanding your own attitudes and biases towards money. We all have them, we're all influenced, we all feel slightly differently about money, and we'll have had different things taught to us by our parents or by the people that brought us up. We'll have had different experiences with money. And so it's important, I think, to stop and think and go, who am I being most influenced by when I think about how I use my money, and is that the right place? Like, is that influence biblical and godly and full of those values, or does that come from something else? You might want to think about who you learnt about money from. What was your parents or your carers' approach to money? Has how much or how little money they had shaped how you think about it? And I think the tricky questions of, does how much money other people have shape how you see them? In your friendship groups, are there people with different amounts of income, or does everybody you know kind of live at the same level, and how does that shape how you view things? Are you able to empathise with and understand someone who's in a different economic circumstance from your own, both people who have less and people who have more? Or do you kind of see someone with a lot of money and make a value judgment on them because of it? Do you see someone with less and think, oh, I'm not sure how to interact with them, how does that influence it? So We've got build a budget, think about your bank accounts, track your spending, understand your values and your goals, and understand your attitudes and your biases. So I think there's lots in there if you want to have a bit more of a chat now. Maybe you've got some tips about how you use your money that you could share. And I think it would be really good to have a chat and a think around what are your values, what are your goals when it comes to money, and are there any attitudes that you think, oh, I think that has shaped how I see money, and that's a really good thing, or actually that's something I've had to wrestle with and change. So have fun.